it was so different from what was being put out at that time. A lot of the stuff was very heavily sequenced with very, very funky bass lines and these very, very tight sequence drums and all these synth pads, very lush. So, you know, Running Up That Hill and the entire Hounds of Love album was really so devoid of any of that, and such a left turn that everyone just sat up and said, wow, this is totally different.
With this different sound, Running Up That Hill reached #3 in the UK charts, making it Bush's most successful single since Wuthering Heights. The 12-inch dance mix of the track also managed to break the American charts, reaching #20. The new techniques employed on the album and infinite studio time were appearing to have paid off. The relentless dynamic, driving drum sound of the first single had drawn the audience in, and this was maintained moving into the title track of the album, which, in typical Kate tradition, drew its inspiration from the film world. The song opens with a sample from 1950s horror The Night of the Demon, and also includes lyrical references to Powell and Pressburger's Gone to Earth.
Joanna. Joanna.
It's my uncle.
Don't be foolish.
Are you there, Joanna?
Yes.
These things are all faked.
But it is my uncle. I know his voice.
Please don't hurt Mr. Meek.
Got to tell Holden he can't fight it. It's too strong.
He means you must give up the investigation.
This is crazy.
Carswell has the key. He's translated the old book. The answer is there. No.
Look.
It's in the trees. It's coming.
When I was a child, running in the night, afraid of what might be, hiding in the dark, hiding in the street, and the world was full of me.
The track itself seems to be heavily influenced by the Michael Powell film, Gone to Earth. There's a story of a young gypsy girl whose only real companion is this fox cub. The local squire falls for this gypsy girl, and the tragedy of the film is about how it builds up to this climax where the local squire's pack of hounds is chasing this fox cub.
They're after us, Foxy.
I think that's a great song of sexual tension and the sense of being overtaken by desire and at the same time trying to distance yourself. And it's a song that just builds and builds. And at first Kate, in her character is the woman resisting and resisting. And then finally she's kind of giving in. And I love that line where she sort of sings almost with abandon, you take my shoes off and you throw them in the lake.
That was a great fun session. It was really good fun to do. We ended up basically with a setup very similar to this. I think we had 4 toms, but I just set up some toms. There's no snare drum on it. It's basically toms and kick drum. And Kate originally, I think she had a fairly sparse, I seem to remember she had a sparse Fairlight track that just kind of went. And they set up a couple of microphones fairly far away, and Del was working on compressing them like mad and really crunching the sound up. And then I believe we did several layers of drums. But what I was doing is, just like Kate asked Stuart on Running Up That Hill to do the improvisations at the end, I asked if he was just playing the particular fills and then doubling, and he said, no, I was actually doing them with double sticks. He said I was going things like that, and he said Kate was getting me to do everything double. And so what actually happened with Hounds of Love was very similar. I went, and then we did a double track of that, and I tried to play different toms. So in the end, you end up with this blanket, this ridiculous blanket of percussion.
Oh, here I go, coming for you through the trees. Oh, help me, someone, help me, please. Take my shoes off.
Hounds of Love is very much a companion piece to Running Up That Hill and Big Sky and Cloud Busting, and that they're all driven by these thunderous drums. They feature a drone and minimal harmonic movement. It's a technique that was clearly in the air in Bush Studios in 83, 84, 85 when she was making the album. The loop would go on, a few minimal changes would occur, chord changes, and she would write the song over the top.
It's also very unusual in that many of the bass frequencies are taken up by other instruments apart from a bass guitar. Very few artists will have the confidence to get rid of a bass guitar. It's the given in popular music. 99% of all tracks have a bass guitar, or more recently, bass frequencies. Well, on that track, I always feel you're kind of rootless without a bass guitar, and it's taking the track into different areas, and it gives the track a different atmosphere if it doesn't have the comfort of a bass guitar. Similarly with drums, if you take away hi-hats and cymbals, those splashes of excitement, it's far more kind of doomy and atmospheric, and you get that throughout this album.
And her voice is different on this song too. I think her voice has changed on the Hounds of Love, the album. Anyway, it's deeper, it's more dynamic. She's going into different territories with it.
Hounds of Love was the third single to be released from the album. It peaked at number 18 in the UK charts and reaffirmed Bush's darker approach to standard love songs. However, the next track, The Big Sky, although still maintaining the driving nature of the first two songs, appeared much more playful, not only in its sound, but also in its subject matter.
With The Big Sky, you've got the third track in a row that basically has the same underlying disco beat. This one is more playful. It ultimately ends in a kind of a jam. It's one of the few tracks on the album that you feel the musicians just play for a couple of minutes and they record it.
The Big Sky was really the album's lightest track, not in terms of sound. I mean, it was very heavy, but it was about having a sense of wonder, like when you're a kid, at the big sky and nature and stuff like that.
It's certainly inspired by a kind of a lighter range of subjects. Her influences of weather, looking at a sky, looking at clouds move. Apparently she wrote a lot of this album just sitting and staring out of a space in Ireland, looking at the weather unfold and roll in on her.
I'm looking at the big sky. I'm looking at the big sky. No, I'm looking at the big sky. You never understood me. Never really tried.
Yeah, I think The Big Sky was a response to a lot of the criticism she'd got after The Dreaming. That whole sense that she'd gone mad and that she'd lost the plot. And in it she seems to be saying that I'm looking at the bigger picture, and you know, my horizons are greater than you thought.
Musically, there's in conventional terms, there's nothing going on at all. We're in F. And apart from the opening section, which that The rest of the track then just does this. Which again is the home chord F, followed by a nearby chord, the flat 7, E flat, over F and the bass. And that's it, just backwards and forwards between those. And what she does is just build it and build it and build it to this wailing cacophony of sound, which features some of the least inhibited of her vocal sounds.
When she's singing it, she's got this sort of gospel inflection, and as if she's almost in a place of religious devotion to her art or just the experience, and she gradually becomes more and more animated, and then just free forms.
Some of the things she's doing towards the end have got an almost Yoko Ono quality, that sort of retching, wailing thing that seems to come from the depths of the stomach and the depths of the soul. No inhibition, incredibly expressive. It's mixed, you know, thankfully low enough for it not to be too grating. And by the time she's built to that climax, it actually sounds like it's the only place she could possibly go vocally, because everything else has happened.
We did this flamenco hand clapping, you know, with the tempo was about here, and Del and I both went to the studio, and we started by doing that, the downbeat. And then we had to do the upbeat, the one, so that it ended up sounding like, you know, and that, what we also did with that is, I believe that we recorded one on one side and one on the other side. So if you listen to the stereo, it kind of goes, which is a great effect.
I think it's more of a pop single. It sounds an awful thing to say in the context of Kate Bush, and as if everything she needed to do had to be almost sort of classical or art rock or slightly off the wall, but it sort of works as a real pop single.
After such a high tempo beginning to the album, track 4, Mother Stands for Comfort, sees the pace drop and the mood darken considerably. The only track from side 1 not to be released as a single, it features low-key playing and shards of sampled sound from the Fairlight, depicting a dark tale.
As I understand it, it's a woman whose son is a murderer, saying that she will still be there for him. And it's underpinned by a beautiful bass line from a German acoustic bassist called Eberhard Weber, who came in and played on, I think, 2 or 3 tracks on the album. So it's very doleful, but quite sparse. This definitely takes us away from the comforting 4/4 beats of the dance floor. This is, in a sense, going back to the more experimental terrain of the dreaming, but works very well as a complete shift away from the upbeat nature of the previous 3 tracks. A very good track.
Mother Stands for Comfort is a very strange song, because it starts off making you believe that it's going to be one of these positive female tracks, and then turns into almost a psychological analysis of a woman who refuses to see any wrong in her offspring, and so it ends up with the mother protecting the murderer, mother protecting the madman, and so there's some sort of slightly creepy element to it as well.